here in Las Vegas at 2023 Pac-12 Football Media Day. It's been a long day, Brian, because the Buffaloes went almost last, second to last today.
Yeah.
I think they were probably sick of answering questions by the end of it, but overall it's one of those days where you hurry up to wait around. At the end of it, you have some decent stuff.
Yeah, I think we got some good stuff. I don't know about you. I thought I did, and it was interesting getting a little bit of time with Shedeur, Sanders, and Travis Hunter. That media day is always nice because you get to see these guys in a different context than just post-practice in their pads or whatever it is. And so I thought that was good. And I also thought, while a lot of people were disappointed that Coach Prime was not here, I thought the benefit for us was we got a really nice conversation with Charles Kelly today, probably something that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And Charles Kelly did a great job, filling in for Coach Prime. I thought he sounded head coach-like, but not in a bad way, not like just coach speak, but was very poised and things like that. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, and the reason I said I felt like everybody was sick of answering questions was at the very end, Shedeur and Travis were asked about being picked to finish 11th in the Pac-12 media poll. And you could tell by the look on their face, they've probably been asked that question about 100 times today. Yeah. And I love Shedeur's answer there. He's like, well, they didn't do their research. And that is part of the truth. The other part of the truth is that this conference is stacked this year, and everybody looks at the quarterbacks, established quarterbacks onto the rosters, and that's part of why Colorado's picked to be 11th as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I also think part of it, to be fair, is that this is a roster filled with a lot of guys that have come from other places that maybe didn't play a whole lot, or maybe they came from a lower level, and there is that general tendency to wonder, like, how are these guys going to translate to a starting role or moving up a level? And so it's such a large group of those guys that, and I'm not knocking them at all. It doesn't mean they can't play, but I think it's more so that we haven't seen these guys play at this level, and certainly haven't seen them play at Colorado because we were looking at one point during the day, CU's information they gave us. They have a newcomer roster with 88 players on it, which counts the walk-ons, but that's a lot of new players. I mean, the rosters are about 120 when you add in the walk-ons. 88 new players, and there's probably going to be maybe a couple more walk-ons by the time we get to fall camp. So yeah, I think that's part of it, is that people have not seen what this team looks like.
One of those newcomers, Cormani McLean, is a guy that's already drawn a buzz and already has a nickname in Boulder.
Hopefully, I'm sure he's hoping it's a short-lived nickname, but what do you call him? Travis calls him Pukey, which I imagine means that he struggled a little bit with the altitude in the early going. But yeah, that might be something that later on, if Cormani McLean lives up to the hype, we'll look back on and laugh and say, remember the days when he was called Pukey, and now here he is, as an all-conference or all-American type corner.
Well, one thing I've noticed covering Colorado football as long as I have is that the altitude affects everybody differently.
Yeah.
Some guys can be in great shape, and for whatever reason, they get up to altitude, and it just kicks their butt for a couple weeks, and then a month later, they've completely gotten over that, and that's not an issue anymore. And I can't think of any guy where that's been a lingering issue. So they can poke fun at it now because it's not going to be a lingering issue, and Cormani McLean will get himself in well condition. But
I will say, it was one of the last questions that they got at the end of a very long day, and it did perk up Travis Hunter and make him laugh quite a bit. So that was probably a good timing on that question.
Obviously, the key if Colorado is going to have success, and the key for Arizona State, which similar overhaul on their roster, not quite to the extent of Colorado, but they did something that's really unprecedented in the Pac-12 as well. It just happened to be the same year that Coach Prime did it on a bigger stage, so it doesn't get quite as much national attention. But first off, it's crazy. I saw our Arizona State guy and was like, a year ago, Herm Edwards was walking around out in Los Angeles, lost in the building. Carl Durrell was still there. So much has changed since then. But going back to programs that have so many newcomers, the key is gelling that group quickly. I do think with this younger generation, they've grown up on tablets and they've interacted with people around the country more than we did when we were kids. I think it's easier for them to adapt to new people than maybe when we were their age.
Yeah, and I asked Shedeur Sanders that, like, how is this team coming together? That's kind of one of the big questions people have, and he's like, I don't really know what to say because I don't know any different. He goes, I've never been a part of a team that wasn't together. He goes, it's just kind of what we do. We come together, we play football, and there's camaraderie. So he made it sound like it's no big deal. I mean, we're all here working on the same thing, and that's great for Buff fans to hear, I think, because I think that is one of the big questions is how, because we haven't seen it. we haven't seen anybody bring in 88 new players and gel them together to make a winning football team. But Travis and Shedeur were both like, it's no big deal. I mean, we're coming together.
There's not many scholarship returners left on the roster. It's crazy. There was about a month stretch here this summer where separate occasions I heard from returning guys that said the chemistry is better now in the locker room than it ever was before.
Yeah.
Now that's because they weren't winning football games.
Right.
And I don't know, they're comparing that maybe to what they saw in the fall, and that is yet to prove itself with this team. If they start losing games, then it could be a real problem.
Yeah.
But that was interesting that I heard it from 3 different people, and there's not a whole lot of guys left on this team.
Right.
So people can kind of guess some of the people that I maybe talked to about this. But I thought it was incredible because these guys committed to a different staff. They're not Coach Prime guys, and yet they have come out and said that this locker room's better right now, which I was surprised.
Yeah, and I talked to one player that was on this team last year that was telling me that, hey, the competition's way better. Just in the weight room, he said there's little competitions they have now. It might be 2 defensive linemen. They're like, hey, let's do this. They're doing a plank with a 45-pound plate on their back, see who can last the longest. And this player was telling me, if I would have done that last year and got somebody to do that, everybody would have been like, nah, I don't want to do that. And just little things like that. You're like, okay, there's a fire on this team, and I think that's the one thing when you see why they had to overhaul the roster. Now, there were good players on this last team that are no longer here, but I think one of the things is you had to change the mindset, and you now have almost a full team of guys that they have bought in to what this is, and they came here knowing what they're getting themselves into, and the 10 players that are left now know what they've gotten themselves into. So you've got a whole team that knows what to expect.
It's interesting with Charles Kelly being here. He's been asked a lot of Nick Saban questions, and I think on 3 different occasions today I heard him say, well, Nick Saban and Coach Prime are pretty similar guys in terms of their standard, their philosophy. Yeah. And, he says that they just pull everybody up to their level. That's the unique skill that those guys have now. Coach Prime has to prove it at the Pac-12 level, obviously. Mike McIntyre, Carl Durrell, they had a plan, but they didn't have Coach Prime's charisma, his legendary status that will bring people up to that level, or they don't cut it. You go out and find another transfer to take that spot. And so it's been interesting comparing what's going on with this program compared to what we've covered in the past, and it really is a 180.
Yeah, and frankly, they didn't have the magnetism that Coach Prime has, and a lot of that comes from the charisma. I get it, but these people want to be around Coach Prime, whether it's coaches, whether it's players. It's something new around here. We'll see if it works, but you have to like what he's building as far as the team chemistry, the team camaraderie, and just that will from coaches and players that they're all striving for the same thing.
One guy I'm really anxious to see in preseason camp is Demoy Kennedy, because Charles Kelly, his eyes light up when you ask him about Demoy Kennedy. He said he was really coming into his own when he got hurt at Alabama last year. Obviously transfers into Colorado's program and is up there running with some of the top receivers in terms of speed this summer. And so that's one of the things you just love to see aesthetically, is a fast guy out there at linebacker, which Davion Taylor was that, but he came in so raw. We really didn't see the product really showing itself until late in his career. Right. I'm anxious to see if Demoy Kennedy can be that type of guy.
Yeah, I think he can. I mean, and I remember Coach Hart saying in the spring that when he's healthy, he's going to be our fastest linebacker, and he's going to play a lot. Charles Kelly pretty much said the same type of thing today. And I'll add another guy that he seemed to really kind of light up about was Savell Smalls. He was asked about him, and Savell was a 5-star guy that went to Washington, played every game, but mostly on special teams, didn't play a ton. 5-star edge that didn't have any TFLs or sacks at Washington, but he said Coach Kelly said he's one of the guys that's impressed him the most, and that he's looking forward to seeing him. So Buff fans have got to like hearing that, because the more depth you have there at that spot especially, we know they had the fewest sacks in the country last year. The more depth you can have there, the better.
I knew that Charles Kelly didn't have a lot of history in this part of the country, but just the other day I was going back through looking at his resume a little bit, and I noticed he's never lived west of Arkansas until getting this Colorado job. So it was interesting talking to him about that. These events are good for that, being able to get into some other conversations. Did anything stand out about Media Day this year before we get into George Kliavkoff and the TV deal? or lack thereof?
Well, really just getting a chance to chat with Coach Kelly and getting to meet him more, and was able to chat with him even outside some of the interviews that we've done. But just getting to know him a little bit. Really personable guy, and really experienced coach that he has learned from Coach Saban, and came from that Florida State tree with Bobby Bowden, where obviously the Bowden legacy was there. So he's learned under some great guys, but that was probably the biggest thing, and really just a couple times just getting a chance to talk with Shedeur and Travis, and they're clearly business oriented. These guys are 100% locked in. I mean, I asked both of them, what do you think of media day? They're like, just interviews, whatever, let's just get to work. And so that's the first time out of all the media days I've covered, I always ask guys, like, how's media? Oh, it's fun. A lot of these two guys were both like, whatever, it's interviews. I want to get to work. And so I like that approach. These guys are ready to go.
George Kliavkoff kicked things off here at Media Day bright and early. It's funny, I came up here for breakfast and I was like, where is all the media? You host this in Vegas, you're not going to get everybody in here by 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. So it was a little bit of a late arriving crowd, but Kliavkoff did kick it off. No news there. It was interesting to see that he backed away from some of the tone that he had that was really defensive at last year's Pac-12 Media Day and brushed a few things off more this year. But the thing I didn't like is that it's kind of like they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes that, no, this is the timeline that we wanted all along. Yeah. And it's great that we've waited so long because now it's going to benefit us. And it's like, okay, I get why you're saying that because you kind of have to because you don't have a deal yet. But you would not have spoken as the commissioner of the Pac-12 at last year's Media Day in that tone if you knew a year later you still were not going to have a deal.
Yeah, I mean that was probably the big disappointing thing is that people wanted that deal. They want that deal to happen. They wanted it to already happen, right? And yeah, that was the biggest thing. It was like, come on, don't tell us this is the timeline you wanted all along. The one thing is it was the first time in several months that he has talked, and that was good that he got out there and he didn't shy away from any of the questions. One thing he was pretty definitive about, and I get that this is kind of in the stance of the Pac-12, but he was pretty definitive that, hey, I'm not worried about conferences poaching our teams, and we are together, and we're going to be in on this. And I know that's the message that we've been hearing, but just hearing it from him, he was pretty definitive about it. And he actually made a comment at one point. He said, we purposely didn't announce a media deal today because we wanted the focus to be on football. And somebody asked, wait a minute, does that mean, and the way he said it makes it sound like, oh yeah, it's done, we just don't want to announce it today. And he was asked a follow-up, like, is that what that means? He goes, no, you're reading too much into that. Like, well, it's hard not to read that into that comment. I think he maybe misspoke there, but it did maybe give an indication that there is something close. I don't know.
And the other part of that is we can't focus on football until you guys get this TV deal organized.
That's the thing is, he wanted to focus on football. I'm not sure any of the questions to him were about football.
Yeah, I want to get back to football. We had a video earlier this summer just kind of sharing some of our frustration of like, this is not what we got into sports journalism to cover TV deals. I've learned way more about television than I ever wanted to throughout this process.
TV and all that stuff that I didn't really care about before.
You put a gun to my head, I think Colorado's in the Pac-12 a year from now. Yeah. But I don't put a whole lot of stock into that yet. Until that number is firm and in front of the decision makers across the conference, you can't say that everybody's committed. And it's kind of like when an AD supports his head coach. They are committed until the last second when they're not. And I don't know if that's going to result in Colorado jumping ship. And right now I would guess that they don't, but it's still a possibility.
It's still very much a possibility. I think as long as there's not a deal, it's very much a possibility. But I'm with you. I think that I do believe that Colorado will stay in the Pac-12. I think they're going to get this done, and the Colorado will stay. But again, until that happens, it very well could be that they leave.
Yeah, we got less than 2 weeks till preseason camp, so we got everything coming up here. We've got a new place to try. Charles Kelly mentioned Goodfellas, a diner in Longmont, so we got another place we got to try now.
Yeah, next analysis video from Goodfellas in Longmont.
All right, Brian, anything before we sign off here? I'm ready to get back to work. It's been a crazy off season, but I want the Colorado fans out there to enjoy this, and I want to try to, as much as we can in our job, enjoy it as well, because we've talked today about what things looked like 7, 8, 9 months ago and a year ago at Media Day. It's cool that folks are coming up to you now wanting to talk Colorado football. It wasn't the case before.
No, it wasn't, but I will say, even though we have 6 weeks of it still, I am tired of talking about Colorado football and talking about Colorado football because I just want to see this product on the field. All the speculation, I don't know how it's going to look. Nobody does. I just want to see a game, and let's see how it looks. I think we're all ready for that, but we got 6 more weeks, and we have a full training camp to go through. So, but I think you and I are ready. I would guess if there was a game this Friday, we would love it to find out exactly what this team looks like.